Do you often dream things that happen just as you dreamed them?
Yes.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain.
Well, hello there, folks. My name is Caleb, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Second Son Woodworks here on my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be showing you how I built this pain box that is out of the science fiction novel Dune, which will soon become a movie. And I wanted to do something kind of goofy and fun for Halloween, so I made this box. It's a trick box, as you might call it, but it's also a pain box. But in the movie, the main character, Paul, has to put his hand into the box, and he asks, what's in the box? And then there's pain in the box. So I was able to find this this little trick buzzer thing off of Amazon, and you just wind it up, and I think it was originally meant for shaking people's hands, and then when you shake their hands, it would make this buzzing noise. And it actually doesn't electrocute you, but it will freak out the person that you're doing the trick on. And so I created this box with a little insert in the bottom side of the box where this can sit. So after you wind it up, you can insert it into the box and then leave it. And or go to somebody and say, put your hand in the box, and they'll get a little surprise. And it's kind of freaky and fun. But anyways, if you like the science fiction novel Dune, and if you're stoked about the movie, which I'm stoked about, because the book was awesome. If you haven't read it, you should read the book. It's a big book, but it's really fun. It's about a desert planet, which is awesome. But if you want to nerd out about that, stick around and I'll show you how I built this pain box. Alright, that's enough. Yeah, that still gets me every time. Alright. Building this box was pretty simple and fun, and the best part was I was able to use some scrap wood that was left over from some other projects. I think found it in my garage. But the first step was to kind of get an idea of how I would be building the box. To do that, I pulled up a photo on my phone of the box that I found on the internet, and then I did some sketching, wrote down some measurements, took some measurements, tried to envision how the box would look, and did my best to figure out a plan before I just started hacking away at that wood, which I have been known to do. This box is super simple. It just has 5 separate sides, one for the top, one for the bottom, one for the side, and one for the other side, and then one for the back. And since there isn't a front side of the box, I didn't need to worry about cutting any sort of groove like I will be doing for the back side of the box for the back wall of the box. But to start, I went ahead and cut down the piece of plywood that I'll be using for this box, this piece of scrap plywood. I cut off of one of the straight edges on my table saw, and then from there, before taking it over to my miter saw to actually cut the different walls with a 45-degree miter, I decided to cut a rabbit cut on one side of the piece of plywood that would end up being the back side of the box, where I could then insert a separate piece of plywood that would be the back side of the box. And to do this, I just set the height of my table saw at 1/2 inch, and then the distance from the blade to the fence at 1/2 inch. And then I was able to do 2 separate cuts to cut out a rabbit on the end of this piece of plywood before I took it over to the miter saw to actually cut into the different walls. Whenever you're adjusting something like this on your table saw, or really any tool, you should unplug your tool and then plug it back in. Be safe. And then, like I said, after that I took the piece over to my miter saw and I began to cut the 4 separate pieces that will make up the 4 separate walls, or I guess the bottom and the top, and then the 2 walls of the box. 2 of the pieces for the side walls will be the exact same size, and then the 2 for the top and the bottom will also be the same exact size. And each of those have a 45-degree miter on the ends. And if you're doing something like this, you can kind of decide if you want to do the continuous grain and or if you just want to use up as much of the wood as possible. Since this is plywood and I'll be painting it black, I just wanted to get as much use out of this piece as possible, so I would just flip the work piece over. I didn't do the continuous grain fashion. That'd be more important if I guess I was trying to utilize the grain of the wood in the actual outside of the project, or outside of the box itself, so that it looked really nice. But like I said, painting it black, so it doesn't really matter. Once those 4 pieces were cut, I went ahead and took them over to my workbench where I had these Bessie strap clamps set out, and I just wanted to make sure that everything fit together okay. And then also wanted to take a measurement for the piece of plywood that I will be cutting for the back side of the box that will sit into that little insert where I did that cut on the table saw. After that, I went back over to the miter saw and took the leftover scrap piece of plywood that I had from the 4 walls, and then I cut down a section that could be used for the back wall, and I ended up having to use just a little bit of the section that had the rabbet cut, but then when I flipped it over to actually insert it, it fit well. And then I went ahead and moved on to the next step, which the next step will be to install some sort of drilled hole in one of the bottom pieces of the box, so that when I insert the little hand buzzer thing, it will have a place to sit. And this is going to probably be the worst drill job that I've ever done because, well, I didn't have the right size of drill bit, so I had to just do a bunch of small drilled holes with a smaller drill bit, and then I used my chisel and hammer to kind of chisel out a section. It didn't have to be perfect. This is just for fun, and I just wanted to be able to insert the little buzzer into the box, a place where it could sit. Now, to add an additional aesthetic feature to the box, I decided to take some additional scrap wood, but some nicer wood, and cut down some pieces, some thin strips that could be glued to the top of the box to kind of give it a little bit more of a aesthetic, nice look to it or something, I guess is my idea. I wanted the box to look more like the box that's in the movie. So to do that, I took out my feather board and cut down some thin pieces on the table saw. Always be careful when you're doing this kind of stuff. Feather board is very helpful to prevent kickback and make sure that the workpiece stays tight against your fence as you're pushing it through. Get one if you don't have one. They're great. After that, I went back over to my workbench and did just some sanding of these different pieces, as well as the pieces of plywood, just to make sure that everything was ready to receive the first coat of paint. I'll just be using some black spray paint, but it's a good idea to open up the grain of wood when you're using paint, because then it will soak up more of it. From there, I went ahead and took a plastic dropped cloth and laid it out onto my workbench so that I could go ahead and prep for the painting. But before actually moving on to the spray painting, I wanted to go ahead and tape off the miters where I will be actually gluing the box together, and additionally the back side of the box where I'll be putting the back wall in. I could just glue everything together and then paint it, but I figured that I wouldn't be able to really get a good paint job on the inside of the box because it will be pretty tight. So instead I decided to use some masking tape, tape off the sections where I'll be adding glue, and then spray paint everything else just for a first coat. And then later on, when the box is fully together, I can go ahead and do an additional coat. And this actually worked out well in the end, and I'd recommend doing it this way. And like usual, the spray painting was easy and fun, but the fumes were kind of intoxicating, so make sure you wear a mask. It's important for your safety.
It's October 2014. West Africa is in the middle of the biggest Ebola outbreak in history.
There are dozens of new cases every day. In Sierra Leone, officials say so many people are dying of Ebola that dealing with their bodies is becoming a problem. A quarantine zone has been imposed around one area, but the disease is still spreading.
Ebola spreads through sweat, blood, and saliva. And the health systems in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia are job at Doctors Without Borders in her home country, South Africa. She was a part of the national staff there. That's what the organization calls its local workforce. But Indira still really believed in Doctors Without Borders' life.
After the first coat of paint on the first side of the different pieces of plywood was painted and dried, I went back, flipped everything over, and then went ahead and spray painted the other sides. After everything had dried, I went ahead and removed all of the masking tape and moved on to gluing the box together with a liberal amount of wood glue. And I used the Bessie strap clamps that I referred to earlier on. These are great for doing stuff with 45-degree miters, especially boxes, as they make the glue up process a lot easier than trying to use regular clamps. Once everything had dried and I could remove the strap clamps, did a little test to make sure that the box actually fit a hand into it, and it did. And then I made sure it fit the little buzzer into the hole, and it also did, which was exciting. Now at this point I remembered that I had cut the different pieces for the top of the box, and so I went back over to my table saw and cut down some 45-degree angles so that it could sit on the top of the box almost like a little frame, but just to give it a nice divot, nice aesthetic feature to the top of the box. But because I spray painted it before gluing these pieces onto the top of the box, you'll see here in a second that I use CA glue as opposed to wood glue to go ahead and glue the 4 pieces to the top of the box. It worked fine. If you've never used this glue that dries really quickly and it dries almost instantly when you spray it with the stuff that activates it, which I do here in a second. If you've never used this stuff, you should give it a try. It's really handy around the shop. It can do a lot of things. Not an expert on this stuff, but the spray that you use after you put down the glue makes the glue dry really fast. And so it was pretty much dry upon contact, and then I was able to go ahead and spray paint an additional coat on the outside and inside of the box. And then after the box dried, the box was complete, and it's pretty stoked. Pretty fun little project. Hope you enjoyed this video. Leave comments below, subscribe if you haven't, and get into the shop and build something fun or cool or both. Thanks guys, take care.